We are delighted to welcome back to King's virtually former Tradescant boy, Jeet Ghose, as he presents Working in the World of Startups. Jeet left King's in 2011 and is the co-founder and CEO of Mountbase. And in Jeet's own words to me on Monday, his company is the Netflix for businesses. Jeet will provide his own insight into the entrepreneurial world of startup businesses. This will be absolutely fascinating, and we're absolutely privileged to have Jeet with us. Please, at any time, type your question into the Q&A function of Zoom, or alternatively, put your virtual hand up, and we can put you live onto the air to ask Jeet your question yourself. Now, it is with great pleasure that I welcome Jeet. Jeet, welcome back to King's.
Hi, Greg. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Look, it's wonderful to have you here. Please start by telling us your memory of King's and particular time in Trad.
Oh yeah, I really, it was a great time. I was there from 2006 to 2011. I really, enjoyed the sort of sports side of it. I was in Tradescant House. I really enjoyed sort of the buildings and what, being able to grow up and sort of go to these amazing classes and these amazing old and historical buildings. So I really enjoyed that. And, obviously being in Trad as well, a lot of memories of backfield football as well.
and so you left King's. What happened when you left King's? So you finished. What happened next?
So I was after I left King's, I was meant to go to university. So instead of going to my first choice, I didn't actually get the grades that I wanted. So I went to the Richmond American International Uni through clearing. Then I did the very tech founder thing to do and drop out after sort of 6 months because it just wasn't for me. I was doing international relations and politics. But then I kind of, narrowed down and realized that I did want to actually go to uni. So after having 6 months out, I started at the University of Kent, where I studied politics at undergraduate. And then I did a master's in international business and management. And then after that, I got a job out in Dubai working in real estate. And since then, working in multiple startups, launching a company, selling one off, and then launching Mountbase. So just so we're absolutely clear, what is a startup? So it can, the definition can vary because you can see a lot of stuff out there. But in the most basic terms, a startup is a very early stage company that tends to be less than £1 million in revenue or less than sort of 20 people in headcount. But it's kind of a look and a feel more than like an actual, a term of what a startup is.
Okay, and again, going on that same lines, define an entrepreneur.
Again, I think for me, working extensively in this world, like an entrepreneur is actually someone at the end of the day that solves problems. So it doesn't even really mean that you have to start a business or, be a CEO of a company or start something from scratch. If you're, passionate about solving problems, you can be an entrepreneur, basically.
And so you mentioned, and you can be an entrepreneur. So who can be an entrepreneur? What are some of those successful traits of entrepreneurs?
Oh yeah. So what we've seen, working in startups and, seeing them come in basically so many shapes and sizes, anyone can be an entrepreneur. But the core sort of key skills that I've seen is that, people are super passionate about what they do. So the problem that they're solving or the company that they founded, what problem that they're solving, tends to be very, very personal to them, or they just, have a passion and love for the industry that they're working in. The second sort of trait tends to be leadership. So they are very, very strong leaders, whether that's through being super passionate about what they're doing or actually knowing how to, communicate a mission and a vision to other people to get them on board as well. And I guess the final thing is you have to be really, really resilient mentally and physically to be a entrepreneur, because a lot of it's the hardest thing you do in your professional career. It's the most stressful thing you can do as well, I think, in your professional career. There's a lot of setbacks, and if you decide to go and start up your own business, from day one, everything will be against you until suddenly you'll find some success, and then it all kind of flips over the other way.
And Particularly, I mean, you sort of touched on some of the challenges of an entrepreneur, particularly what are those challenges in the early days?
Sure. So in the early days, it kind of boils down to three things. It boils down to the main one, financial stress and challenges. So if you are trying to start up your own business or bring a product to life that doesn't exist, trying to find the capital is really, really challenging because it's out there, and you'll see people that are maybe somewhat in your industry or in your niche, raising a lot of money, and it's very challenging when you're not doing the same. But communicating why your product there is a need for this can be also very difficult in the early stages. And the second sort of challenge can be finding a community and having like a support system around you, because it can be very, very lonely being a startup founder. A lot of people we work with actually tend to have multiple founders, at least two, but that's just because only you know what you're going through at any one point, right? So you've got your co-founder who you can kind of lean on in terms of the stress of the business, the stress of whether it's going to work out or not, and they're kind of the only other person that's in the trenches with you from day one. And I guess the final sort of challenge is success isn't guaranteed. So knowing that and making decisions on the fly and sort of working towards your goal without any reassurance that it could work, because there are many startups out there that have great ideas that could have changed the world, but are dead today just because things that were completely out of their control, like timing or technology that was available. So those are kind of the three key problems.
I mean, touching on that first one you mentioned then, which I think is probably the crux of it, is getting the money and almost live and die by that as a startup. Sort of how do you go about the fundraising for a startup?
So there's so many different ways you can go about it. It depends the type of startup that you're trying to start. So if you're trying to do a tech product or a product that's sort of very physical, the approach is very different. So if you're trying to build out a tech product, you will probably need quite a lot of money, just because you need to hire developers if you don't know how to develop a product, or you might need to hire design teams to kind of design out that whole build for you. So getting that money can be very difficult, but you can approach a lot of angel investors. There's a lot of funds in the UK that work at kind of pre-seed funding. So as long as you have like a really strong and clear idea and a route to market and how you're going to sort of build it out, it's quite, I wouldn't say easy, but there are funds available there to kind of fund your business. The other type of startups that we've worked with have been completely different. So they're very self-funded. So, there's a story I like to tell about one of our content partners, Kieran Savage. He started a card processing company. So he, back, about 7-8 years ago, he decided he was going to help, companies process card payments. And he started that business with £100 in a backpack, and he just went to every single shop in the Midlands and in the North, helping them, get card payments. And now he's Forbes 30 under 30 and sort of turning over £5 or £6 million a year. So, and that was with £100 in his pocket.
You definitely have to be resilient and believe in your idea, really, don't you? If you've got any chance. We have our first question in. It's just a reminder, please type your question anytime into the Q&A part of Zoom, or don't hesitate to put your virtual hand up and we can put you on to ask your question direct of Jeet. But David asks, what is an angel investor?
Sure. So an angel investor is an investor that isn't normally tied to a company or isn't tied to a fund. So that can just be literally anyone with some money that believes in your idea and wants to fund you. So realistically, an angel investor can be your mum, it can be your dad, it can be your friend, it can be your girlfriend, it can be your brother-in-law, it can be literally anyone that believes in you. So it can be close friends and family. There are a lot of networks out there in London and across the UK at the moment called angel investment networks, where they're just people that have a bit of money that don't want to invest in, say, more traditional financial products like ISAs or property. What they want to do is they want to take bets on startups, and that's how they invest their money. So an angel investor is like a person, just anyone, really.
That's very clear. Thank you. And I suppose the old adage saying of, don't give up your day job, sort of, can you work? Can you work and be an entrepreneur? Can you sort of combine the two?
Yes and no. So I think it's very, very important to sort of plan out your time and your work schedule. So a lot of people we work with don't immediately go and, they have an idea on a Monday, they don't quit their job Monday evening and start it up on Tuesday morning. What they do is they really plan out what they're going to do, how if there's a need for this product, or if there's going to be a need for this in the future. And they work, their job whilst doing it on the side. Maybe they do it in the evenings or the weekends. And then, when the time restraint becomes too much for just doing it over the evening and the weekend, that's when they quit their job and kind of go, the whole way into their startup. We were filming with this lady called Jana Dowling from a company called Argeo. She actually worked for 2 companies whilst building out her startup. So she technically had 3 full-time jobs. So there's literally no limit as to how much workloads there is in a startup.
I suppose it begs the question, sort of, what's it like working in a startup, and how is that different, say, from your traditional corporate job?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think to answer this one, I'll kind of let you know about sort of a mid-stage startup first. So what I mean by that is this is a startup that's received a little bit of funding. So they have enough money in the bank to have their employees on for 2 or 3 years. They've got, office space, and it's a little bit more traditional in that sense. Working in a startup like that is very different because there's normally a very small team. So you normally be around, say, 5 to 30 people in the office. 30 people can actually be quite big for a startup. So it doesn't really matter. There's no such thing as sort of corporate hierarchy. I mean, yes, there's like a CEO role, there's sort of heads of department, sure, but that doesn't mean that an intern can't have a good idea and talk straight to the CEO about it. So working in a startup tends to be very, very dynamic. It tends to be very fast paced. The way I say, what I always say is, 1 week at a startup is like 3 months in a corporate job, because you will do 3 months worth of work in a week. Not necessarily meaning that you're going to be really overworked. What that means is you're much more hands-on. There's no such thing as, let's just wait around and my boss will tell me what to do. You have to just get stuck in and you do what you can. Things tend to be less rigid than corporate roles. So there's no sort of, we're going to do this every week. And, it's much more reactive than proactive. So you're kind of reacting to what's happening and getting stuck in. In terms of early stage startups, there's some key differences in working in a corporate role. It sounds really silly, but sometimes you don't even get paid when you work at early stage startups. You literally, this founder or CEO will come along and go, this is my idea, this is what we're going to build out. And people are so passionate about it. They go, that's amazing, I want to be part of this journey. Can I work for free until we get funding, and then you can back pay me or whatever, right? Or you can pay me in shares and whatnot. I doubt you can do that at a corporate job. I doubt if I got a job at PwC tomorrow, I can ask some shares, because I don't think that conversation would go very far. But yeah, so working at a startup is very, very different. And one of the other things that I always say is startups aren't really sort of job title focused, they're kind of task focused. So when you apply for a role at a startup, I don't know, your job title can be CEO, but for example, a couple of days ago, my co-founder and I were just standing outside on the street handing out hats and holding signs. So that's something that maybe will be seen as quite a junior level role in like a corporate job, but you kind of do whatever's required whenever's required in the startup.
It's funny, you're just making me reminisce, actually. One of my favorite books I've read is Shoe Dog, which is about the startup, effectively the startup of Nike, looking back to the 70s and seeing how the process they went through to what's become the mega company that it is now. And it really does give you a great insight into the stresses, the pressures, and what you have to go through. And there is no, you do anything to move it on, and you do have to be reactive, as you said.
Yeah, it's very much like a team-focused thing. It's no longer, I feel, in startups, it's not, this is my role, this is what I do. It's basically, we're all one team and we'll just basically do whatever we can to make sure we survive today so we can fight tomorrow, basically. And that's kind of the mentality across most of the successful startups that you see. And a lot of the, massive companies like Apple and stuff today were born with that mentality. And that's why they're so successful the way they are today.
I'll just ask one more question before we have a couple more questions from the audience watching. Before I go to that, just one more from me here. So what are the financial benefits for working in a startup?
Oh, they can actually be ridiculous. So some of the things you'll see, but for right or wrong, I mean, that's for you to judge. But working at a startup is sort of like, what, you know, it's like gambling, but with a bit more legality behind it. So you can invest as little as, you know, £5,000 or £6,000 very early stage, or you can, you know, be employee number one at, you know, very risky startup, and, you know, your friends, your family might think, oh, what are you doing? Why are you taking that job? You're not getting paid. You're getting paid sort of 30% of the market rate or whatnot. But, you know, fast forward 6 years, you probably own maybe 1 or 2% of the company for, you know, taking such a risk early on, and that does pay off a lot financially. So the way I always, you know, look at it is you can take the example of Microsoft. So in the sort of mid-90s, the secretaries at Microsoft were paid in share options because there was just not enough cash in the business to pay them Christmas bonuses. So you fast forward to sort of late 1990s and early 2000s, the secretaries were the most, you know, high net worth employees at Microsoft because their share options were worth that much. You know, there's companies like WeWork out there that have done it in a slightly different way, where the sort of early management team and founders had really large exits, you know, backed by venture capitalist companies, earning sort of north of half a billion dollars. So yeah, it can be very lucrative, but you look at the other side of it, you can also go bankrupt in 2 days and then you're out of a job and you're late on other payments and stuff. So it's two very extremes.
Live and die by the sword, I suppose. Not for everybody.
Yes, exactly.
So German Muller asks, I mean, this just I'm sure everyone's seen the Dragon's Den sort of, as people are going there trying to get some funding and they're trying to work out what proportion of their company they're prepared to give over for that level of money. And that's exactly what the question is, of how much of your company should you give up to an investor?
Yes, that's a really good question. And off the bat, Dragon's Den is and Shark Tank and shows like that are not a reflection of how a real business operates, and not a reflection of how sort of investing negotiations go, right? If you're there's so many different ways to value a company. So for example, you know, if I came up with a 100,000 valuation on Mountbase, you can use different metrics to come up with a £100 million valuation on Mountbase or whatever. So in terms of how much you actually want to give away of your company, the sort of hard and fast rule is that in the earlier the stage, the more you have to give away. So for example, the way the funding rounds work is you have your pre-seed round, then you have your seed round, then you have your Series A and Series B, Series C, and so on. What tends to happen is at Series A level, venture capitalists get involved. So you end up giving away a lot less of your company, but there's not as much risk in investing in your company. So you do get a lot more money, but there is a lot more structure in place and it gets a bit more complicated. But sort of around Series pre-seed and seed funding, you're normally looking to give around 10% to 25% of your company away, just depending on how much capital you're looking to raise. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't buy that back. And there's no sort of hard and fast rule on this either. There's you know, if you're working in the sort of medical tech company, you know, in that sort of space, you can see sort of investments at pre-seed stage of, you know, only 2 or 3% of the company sold, but the sort of seed rounds are around 30 or 40 million. Whereas, you know, if you're working at, I don't know, say consumer goods like gin or vodka companies, you know, percentage of those being sold is sort of 15% for say £50,000. So it can vary, and it is very industry specific.
Yeah, I suppose there's no real one answer, but it does come down to how well it's set up already, how much of a risk the investor's is taking putting that money in.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. So the higher the risk, the higher the percentage.
Yeah. Maths teacher stalwart Andrew McFall asking next question. Thank you for the presentation. And they say there's no time like the present, but the present at the moment with the current financial crisis, uncertainty, is this a good time to be starting up a business?
Yes, because it's counterintuitive, right? The harder the time, the harder the pressure, the harder the industry conditions, the better your company can be if your idea is good. Sort of diamond is, you know, formed under pressure, right? So it's the same for startups. I always believe that, you know, there is always an excuse, oh, it's not a great time to start up your company, there's no funds. blah, blah, blah. But, if your idea is good and your strategy is good, there is always funds. There's always people with money looking to invest in this. And what we've actually seen is it's very cyclical. So as soon as sort of there's talks of recessions and economic hardship, the sort of innovation in startups just sort of ramps all the way up. So you have lots of different people starting up companies that are solving the problems in say the current economic crisis and the sort of stuff around the heating bills at the moment. A lot of those companies will be formed in the next few months, and they'll probably go on to find a lot of success over the next couple of years because of the challenges that we face at the moment.
So it's about trying to find that solution to help people along, and so therefore, and it potentially is even clearer in these moments of crisis almost.
Yeah, and if anything, it actually becomes a little bit easier because what happens is with so much competition out there at the moment, the sort of companies that haven't really been thought through, the companies that haven't really taken their early stage seriously, tend to die out. So you just are left with the good companies that have a plan, that have good founders, that have a great team, and that have a great idea or product. What tends to happen in the good times is you can have companies that wouldn't really survive, any sort of real test surviving because just the economic conditions around them. It's easy to borrow money. It's easy to kind of, postpone the inevitable.
Let's get on to Mountbase. How about I ask you a little bit, tell us about Mountbase. How did you come across the idea? And after you've answered that question, we'll show a clip.
Sure. So back in 2018, I just moved back from Dubai from my real estate job that I really, really didn't like because I was working in a really, really tough real estate sales environment. So I jumped in, I thought I have a bit of time, so let me take a punt on this startup called Cognizant. So I started working there in sales again. So I really enjoyed it though. So it was a very different experience, working in that startup environment. And what I didn't realize at the time, Cognizant was kind of a bed for sort of founders and entrepreneurs because the people they hired are, have gone on to found these amazing companies. And what happened was in my role, I happened to speak to a lot of founders and a lot of, early stage companies about their sales process. And I really got this bug about finding out what other companies are doing and what their products are and sort of this innovation hub. So after that, my co-founder and I, we left Cognizant to start up a management consultancy company out in Dubai, which was working in a completely different sector. So it was manufacturing and logistics and shipping. So it was very different. And what we realized was a lot of the people we spoke with were not trained. They didn't really have much of a learning outside of university regarding sort of how the business world works, even though they had like business degrees and whatnot. So Harriet and I wanted to really combine technology and what people are used to with the business world, because what we've seen is that the business world is about 4 years behind the consumer world. So what's sort of popular now, like for example, TikTok and social media, that will become popular in business in about 3 or 4 years. So for example, social media like Be Real is really taking off at the moment, but the business world will kind of come onto that in about a year and a half because they're lagging behind. So Harriet and I were just saying that if only we could find this way to get mass market storytelling about business to everyone, whether that's in business or just people in general. There was a real gap there, and we were kind of scratching our heads as to how to fix that problem. And then I think one day we were both just like, why don't we just make it? And I'm sure we can do a better job than what's out there. Because we were watching a lot of Dragon's Den, and I was like, this is terrible, and I can't watch this anymore because this isn't real. And because we were also had that network of all these startup founders that we knew, and we were just like, who goes on these shows? These can't be successful companies, right? So that's basically where the idea came from. And at the time, video streaming was really, really booming, and we saw a gap in the market to say that someone should just build this for business, right? A content space where you can get easy access to business content that shows real people doing real things.
Let's see a taster of it, and then we'll come back for some more questions.
I wanted to start something myself, which I think my wife thinks I'm having a midlife crisis. and I'm behaving like a 24-year-old instead of a 40-something with 3 kids.
One of the reasons why I started Work Me, Shape Me was to form a community of people that like to try different things. Like all I ever wanted was basically on a Saturday morning to work out and go for brunch with a group of people that get me.
We're not photographers, we're not customer service people, we're not content creators, we're not merchandisers, we're not packers. We are all the firefighters trying to put out a fire every single day. And there's little fires, there's big fires. And as long as that fire gets put out by the end of the day, like, happy days, you've had a successful day.
My name is Ed Barry.
Hi, I'm Janet.
My name's Aileen Duffy.
Hi, I'm Ahana.
My name is Julian Osborne.
I'm Kieran Kelly.
I'm Nick.
I'm Kieran Savage.
My name's Arjun.
I'm Ben.
I'm George.
I'm Matt.
I'm James.
Hi, my name's Bobby.
I'm Jed.
And I'm Aaron.
My name's Hector Ford.
Hi, I'm James.
Hi, I'm Anna.
My name's Vanessa.
My name's James Islay.
I'm Ollie Scott.
I am Josh Connolly.
Let's begin.
No, I thought he was going to say go.
Okay.
Is it after
go.
3 or?
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Let's begin.
And that is a wrap.
Back to the studio.
Back to the studio.
Back to here.
Back to Noah's falling asleep. Noah!
That was a whistle stop tour. Gosh, it must bring back a lot of memories for you, Jeet. How long have you been going for now? What's your time period, and yeah, how's that success been sort of projected through?
Sure. So we actually started in 2019, which seems many years ago. But that was sort of when we were proactive. We got the company registered and we did all the sort of admin side of it. But the idea and the product development kind of took a few years, and we kind of went full time in last December. But we hired our first employees on the 1st of February this year. So we've only really been going about 6 or 7 months, really. We've got about 6 employees now. We're sort of growing to 7 in the next couple of months. And now, we've launched our global product. We've launched our web app that you kind of had a glimpse at from some of the content. And we're launching on app stores and doing basically anything that has a screen and connect to the internet will have a Mountbase app by the end of this year. So that's where we are at the moment. But in terms of the people we film with, that was a snapshot of, a handful, maybe 8 of the early people that we film with. So we're now actually booked out until basically June of next year. So we're doing 1 a week. So we're going to be releasing content basically every week. So that's where we are at the moment. So we're super busy. And you, am I right in saying you had one today before this particular talk tonight? Yes, yeah, we did. So I was actually interviewing for Mountbase, and that will be up on our stream site very soon. I was interviewing the ex-footballer Hal Robson-Carney he used to play for West Brom in Wales, and he's very famous for his sort of goal in the Wales in the semi-finals of the Euros. So that's where we've come from, hence the sort of the dishevelled look today. No, it's not. It's great. And tell me about you mentioned in February you were hiring for the first time. What was like? What was that process of hiring and the first foray into properly managing the team? Sure. I mean, it's very different. So I'm only 29. My co-founder is 26. We're responsible for 6 adults that have, some of them have mortgages, some of them have rent payments. They have a life that's sort of, you're responsible for. So that's kind of one challenge that you don't really get in the corporate world, because, before I was sort of told that, my team's going to go by 3. You just go out and you hire people quite easily because there's no pressure on you. But as a founder, it's really important to hire people that you really believe in and that believe in what you're trying to do. So every single one of the people that Harry and I have hired, they're real Mount-based people through and through. So it's kind of counterintuitive because they're so much like us and they really believe in the mission and the vision of the company. It's actually not that hard managing them because they kind of manage themselves. Because working in a startup, you kind of need to have that self-starter attitude. You kind of have to be self-accountable. You have to take initiative. So if anything, it's actually quite easy managing them. One of the things that's quite difficult or can be quite challenging is finding the right people, because what tends to happen is people say whatever in an interview, but then they kind of show you in practice that that's not what it's like. So, coming up with quite real world challenging questions in interviews and stuff was quite different. So what we did was very different to what corporate jobs do. Our interview style is very, very strange as well. So we would normally have a Zoom interview for the first stage where I would do anything except ask them questions about their CV, which made me see if they were sort of how you kind of deal with those situations, right? Because you're there on an interview, but I'm asking you what your favorite Marvel movie is, or what your favorite sports team is, and things like that. And it kind of shows me that if they can have a conversation and kind of really adapt to change. And sort of in the second stage, what we used to do is we'd have like a presentation, but then we'd kind of do this left brain, right brain thing where one of us would ask what their favorite cocktail is, but then the second question would be like, what was their favorite university module or something like that. And that gets people thinking on their feet. So being able to sort of hire people that can perform under pressure is really, really difficult. But once you have them, they tend to not manage themselves, but they make your life a lot easier.
Yeah, I suppose whenever I've gone for jobs, it's always been pretty stock standard questions. The most bizarre question I probably ever had in an interview was sort of, you walk into the zoo, what's the first animal you go to see?
Yeah. What was the first animal you go and see?
Oh, probably the tiger, to be honest. Okay, so tell us about some of those inspirational stories that you've already filmed so far. What are the highlights for you?
Yeah, so the highlights for me, there's so many. I mean, one thing is that we always get inspired. Literally every single person we film, their story is just phenomenal, right? Because when I was growing up, I'd always go and ask people, "Oh, what do you do?" And they'd give me like a really vague answer. But what I've seen is that people that are founders and startup-y type of people tend to give you, they're so passionate about what they do, so they don't mind sharing anything. So I had a story a couple of weeks ago with someone called Lewis from Sly Dog Run. He started up his company because he was really bored of spice drum being very boring. So he just decided one day to take it upon himself and go in and start up a rum company. And that was really inspirational because it was sort of, I've never been in a situation where I'm like, oh, this drink is terrible, I'm going to go change this whole industry because I can or because I want to. Some of the other inspirational stories, the one I mentioned earlier from Kieran Savage is always one that gets me, because his life, if you took a snapshot of where he was at at the age of 19, as an external person, if you kind of looked at that, you would go, oh, this is not great. Because, he was, I think he was divorced at 21. He had a child on the way at 19. He didn't have a job. He wanted to be an actor. And that wasn't going well for him as a career. He wasn't getting any of the jobs that he wanted. So he kind of just turned it all around and just went out there with £100, and now he's Forbes 30 under 30 in financial services. He's the managing director of a company that's turning over £5 million a year. They've just celebrated their 5th birthday. They're just going from strength to strength. But the most phenomenal thing about that as well is that he didn't go down the route of, I'm going to get a little bit of success and get £100 million of VC backing behind me and go do this. He literally just built it up by himself to the way it is today, and he's only had one round of funding. Another one of the stories that I always really like is, it goes to show there's no problem too big or too small, which is George and Matt, and they founded this company called Thursday Dating, and their whole stigma is sort of, it's meant to be in real time. So the app only works on Thursdays. You download the app, you have your conversations, and you have to meet up in real life at an event that Thursday put on at like some of the bars and nightclubs around London, or it can be like fitness classes or whatever. And then your conversations delete after that Thursday. So you can never get those conversations back. So it's really bringing spontaneity back into the dating scene. And, they're going to be a huge company. They're already very international. But the whole reason they both started that company is, they both couldn't find girlfriends after, certain breakups in their life. And it's interesting, right? Because, that's an interesting way to solve that problem, I suppose, is to go and start a dating app. And, and now they're both in very happy, committed relationships. And it's just very, it's a funny story.
We talked about that story on Monday, and I think it's a great story. But what happens if you work on a Thursday night? It's bad luck for you.
Yeah, but I guess to the extent where they've done their marketing so well that internationally Thursday is now referred to International Date Day, because they've just changed the whole industry and the way people work. So in big cities now, Thursday is sort of the night where you go out with your colleagues because everyone works from home on Fridays. So they've changed the whole system, and that's just two guys wanting to sort of get a girlfriend, and now they've changed the way that the dating scene works.
I love it. It's great. We'll come back to the audience questions in just a moment. Just one more question. You talked about trying to get the experts, employing the right people, having the right people around you. What is it like working with those industry experts?
It's great because they teach you so much every day that you don't know. So a lot of what we do is very technical in terms of filmmaking, and our whole USP is that we do literally the whole process. So all the way from pre-production, producing the film, producing the videos, recording them, distributing them, publishing them, and you need experts for that, because I don't know how to use film grade cameras, and I don't know how that whole industry works. But working with the team that we have now, they teach me so much every day. So even on the shoot earlier, they were kind of teaching me how the reason why, you'll not know, but like, for example, in Game of Thrones, they put duvets on the floor so you don't hear people's feet stomping around, and it's like little nuances like that you don't really know unless you work in the industry, but they can teach you so much. And then on the other side of the coin as well, you've got that back. They've kind of got your back, right? Because you know that no matter what happens, they're experts in their field and they know what they're doing, and you can kind of trust them. So it takes a load off. So it means that I now don't have to go and get a film degree or a media production degree tomorrow, because I trust them completely. So it is great.
You don't have to be an expert in everything, I suppose.
Yeah. No,
I
so yeah, exactly. You can't be an expert in everything, because you'll just stretch yourself too thin. I mean, I don't know how to develop apps, nor does my co-founder, but you have to find the right people around you that can do core business functions, and you have to be able to delegate those out, and have trust the people that you hire.
Yeah. Sanju, one of our Lineker lads in 6B, asks, and this is very pertinent to him, and Andrew before also asked us similar sort of question. So are there any specific A levels you think you should be useful in going to become an entrepreneur, or specifically moving into the tech industry?
Yes, there are very specific A levels that will very much help you in that. And I would say learn a skill, don't learn something you can learn on the internet. And what I mean by that is, learn something that's solving problems. So for example, learning how to develop code, or something that will help you learn how to develop code is really, really important, especially if you want to go into tech. Not so that you can go out and start developing code, develop an app tomorrow, but so if someone tells you what's going on, they can't lie. So you have a rough framework as to how that works. And any sort of problem solving A level. So if you do maths or science, that can also really help, because even if you're starting a business, if you're launching a product or a service or something, for example, Hal Robson-Kanu, who we were talking to earlier, he played football for a living, but his company sells turmeric, and they're like consumable products. So you need to know some science. So the guys from the lab get back to you with something, if it's a big problem or if it's not a big problem. But other than that, yeah, if you can learn sort of any technical skills, that always goes to help. So yeah. And other things, sort of anything that can help you start a conversation. So weirdly enough, I always say learning stuff like history or geography or something that can make you a little bit more interesting, it goes a long way, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with other people, and people tend to have similar interests. So anything that helps you with that.
Oleg, just slightly to change another one of our people's, Oleg's asking, are you aware of the main areas to include in your startup costs? How long should this funding last you before you have you have to have cash flow to rely upon?
There's no right or wrong answer. It just depends on your startup. There's a company we interviewed a couple of weeks ago called Unknown. They've been going for 2 years, but they run with only 2 months of cash in the bank. So if one of their invoices get paid late, they only have 2 months, and then they have to sort of start letting people go and stuff. That's not a great way to live as a CEO, because that is a lot of stress. So that's probably something that's the reason why we don't do it that way at Mountbase. But there are a couple of things that you definitely have to consider. So I always plan sort of at least 6 months or 12-month intervals. So in your first year, you kind of want to get a rough guide to how you can get to some sort of money coming in. You don't need to make a profit, but you just need to show other people that this can make some money. So whether that's, you only have enough money in the bank to build a prototype of an app and get one customer who's literally you're paying to be your customer to test out your app. If you have enough money to do that, that might be more than enough to convince a couple of angel investors to come and really sort of take a gamble on you, or back you really. But on the other hand, if you're kind of trying to build a more bread and butter business and not like a tech company, say for example a turmeric shop company or something that sort of sells a physical product, you should really kind of account for your stock. So how much inventory you can keep, the cost of keeping your inventory where it is, the cost of your employees, and other things that go into that, which aren't so apparent. So, for example, HMRC fees and sort of government tax, any liabilities that you might face. So, what I always say is make a budget, then add 20%, so you don't get stressed out. And then what will happen is in 3 months or something of that budget, it will all go skew-if, and you'll go back to the drawing board and you'll get a million more problems and you have to completely re-strategize. So don't plan more than a year ahead. It's a waste of your time.
Wise words. Andrew asks there are some very well-known startup companies that support startups, Virgin being one of them. Do you know any other big players that do the same?
Yes, there are loads of, startup accelerator programs in around not just the UK, but Europe and America as well. So there's Y Combinator, there's Founders Factory, Mountbase are, always open to helping startups and giving out advice. There's loads and loads out there. Literally the list goes on. What tends to happen is you'll have VC companies that have lists of sort of, different startup accelerator programs and stuff. And they're also loads in different niches, for example. So for example, if you want to start up a tech SaaS, which is software as a service, B2B company, there's hundreds of sort of accelerator programs, mentorship programs out there that will help you. But for example, if you want to start up something completely different, like, I don't know, again, just something like, a food and beverage company, there are also niche people out there that'll help you. But the best bit of advice is ask someone who's doing it right now, because, there's a company called This, which is, This Isn't Chicken, or, they have loads of different products. And their CEO and founder, they're so helpful on LinkedIn. So if you just message them like, can I have 10 minutes to talk to you about doing something? They're most likely going to just reply saying yes, because, people love talking about themselves. And we've all kind of been in that situation. I remember when I first wanted to start Mountbase, I had no idea where to go, what to do. So I just reached out to people that were sort of in the same space, and they were invaluable. And I think people that have been there and done it are sort of the people you should be reaching out to first.
And isn't that almost what we're doing today? And also a lot of the point behind your business, Mountbase. Yes, exactly. That was the whole USP, because no one has the right answer, and that's the best thing about it, because there isn't a right answer. The right answer is what works best for you in that point in time, and just showing people that is why we do what we do at Mountbase. Giorgio asks, how did you market your business and what tactics worked? So the way we marketed Mountbase is slightly different. So what we've decided to do is, rather than spend loads of money on the generic Chiva adverts, or go on TV or get an influencer to say, oh, download Mountbase today, we just decided to be ourselves. So that's a lot of Harriet and myself just being out in the street holding a sign up. One of my favorite marketing things was in our office is based in Chancery Lane, which is like a hub of we have a lot of big corporate companies there, like Bird & Bird, and we have a lot of techie companies there as well, because there's a lot of WeWorks around that area and shared office space. So you have a real mix of people. So one day I just decided to get one of those picnic tables that fold out, and I got a cardboard sign that said, "Hate your job, ? Come chat to me about starting your own business." And I just sat there for about the whole of lunch hour, and with a couple of drinks for few bottles of water for people, and I had over 20 people approach me and just talk to me about starting their business. That kind of went viral on sort of LinkedIn and those sort of things, and that's what we do for marketing. I mean, there's no need to spend loads on marketing. What's really important is to find your niche, find the people that are actually going to buy from you and who are going to celebrate your product and celebrate what you're doing as a business, and then grow from there.
Because you can spend so much money on marketing, you'll run out of cash within 5 minutes. I mean, if you get an investment of £100,000, you can spend £100,000 on Facebook ads in 30 seconds, and that's gone, and you don't know what you'll get back from that.
Yeah, questions are flying in, which is absolutely fantastic. Frankie asked, sort of, what habit has helped you most in life?
That's a great question. I think for me, being consistent, and I think weirdly enough, going to King's, one of the things that really, really helped me was sort of just being able to take responsibility for yourself. And it sounds really silly, but like when you're working at a startup, when you're sort of the CEO and the co-founder of this company, there's no one else that I can rely on that's going to cheer me up if I'm having a bad day, or if I'm like, sort of got my head in the gutter and, not feeling a great way because I'm really stressed out. So what's really, really important is, being consistent in what you do in your daily routine. So whether it's, for some people, getting up at 6 a.m. and going to the gym and, getting your workout in and going for a walk and then getting to work at 9 or whatever. For some other people, it's maybe sleeping in until 10 and starting their work day at midday and then working till the evening. But whatever you do, be really consistent with it and be really honest with yourself about it, because you're not competing against anyone else. As long as you do better than what you did yesterday, you're winning. And that's fine. Don't compare yourselves to other people. Don't sort of go, oh, I see Jeff Bezos is sort of doing all these amazing things, I should be doing that. That's just not how it works. Do what's right for you, and then you'll instantly have a lot less challenges. So I guess that's number one. And number two is probably, again, just be really, really honest, because it's life changing. Because if you kind of are carrying around a lot of burden and a lot of weight around what you're doing, and if you're not honest with it, you're not going to find a really good solution. So I think being honest with the company, with your co-founders, with your sort of employees is really, really great. It really helps. And then there's there's no stress in your head. It's all kind of out there, and it's really easy to kind of get on with the real problems.
You're almost, I'm going to ask you the question now, you're almost giving us that King's promotional clip, what was so great about King's. So here we go, we'll pause and we'll go with this now. So you're talking to us about the independence and the structure that King's gave you. So do you want to elaborate any further on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing that I really learned from my time at King's was being really, really self-reliant, and it actually goes a really long way. So I don't need anyone else to sort of look after me from a very young age. And that kind of gives you a real building block to kind of expand on in as you get older. And what I mean by that is little things like, knowing that you can do your own laundry, cook for yourself, look after yourself, take accountability for your own health, take accountability for your own time, is what you actually need to do as an entrepreneur. Because, for example, I could, sit at home and say, oh, I'm working from home today, and I could just play PlayStation for about the whole day. But that's not cheating anyone else except for myself. And then if you put another layer onto that, is that it's fine if you want to call yourself a founder of a company and it's only you, and you want to not waste your time, but if you want to spend your time doing that, that's fine. But if you're responsible for even one other person, you can't do that. So having the accountability to yourself to be like, yeah, sure, I can go enjoy myself in these hours, but only when X, Y, and Z gets done, is really, really important. And having the tools to kind of do that is really important as well. So to be able to just have an honest word with yourself and go, yeah, I really need to get this done, and it doesn't matter if it takes all night, because that's sometimes what it is being a founder. You have to work until 4 or 5 in the morning, but then there are other days where you can go, I'm going to have a lie-in because I worked really hard last week, and you can enjoy it as well because you're being honest with yourself, because you've worked hard, and you can take accountability and you can manage your own time. So going to King's actually really did help me with that, because I felt, instantly after finishing university, or even getting to university, having gone to boarding school, I was already quite ahead of my peers in terms of I didn't have the anxiety of I don't know how to do my laundry, or I don't know how to be away from my family, or I don't know how to be away from my support system and whatnot. I was able to do that from a very young age. So that really, really helped.
That's really helpful and good advice, and really, good advice for the current King's pupils are listening now in terms of what they should be doing and how they utilise their time at King's. Andrew asked sort of, what mistake that you have made that you would most strongly advise others to avoid?
Indecisiveness, for sure. I can give you a very good example. So early on at Mountbase, we didn't always get the hiring process right. And the thing that can cost your business the most is being really, really indecisive. So if you kind of have a nagging idea that, okay, this is a problem and I need to rectify it, but you don't want to do it because you either go, oh, I'll give the person a chance, or the problem will fix itself, or the problem will go away if I just give it time. It is not the case at a startup. It can actually be the problems that are the smallest that you leave will become the biggest problems, and they'll become very apparent very quickly. So you need to make a decision, and you need to make a very well constructed, thought out decision in a very timely manner, and like stick with that decision and not be afraid to back that decision when it, even if it sort of doesn't seem to be the right decision at the time, because most of the time your gut will be right. So yeah, I think that's sort of some of the biggest mistake we made. And again, when you make it once in a startup, you'll not make it again.
Courage of your convictions to go through with the decision, even if it's potentially going to be a little bit wrong, and then move on. Oleg asks, and this is probably how long's a piece of string a little bit, but if you've come up with an idea and you want to start the business with another co-partner, so you're the one with the idea, how much are you expecting to give them in terms of shares?
Yeah, again, it's just what's right, because I mean, if it is your idea, but you need to just be clear in terms of what the expectations are, right? So, for example, if it's your idea and you're going to work on it 100% of your time, you really need to drive it forward, whereas the person you're founding the company with is going to do it, say, 25% of their time and is only going to work part-time stuff, you can just say, we're going to split this 75% me and 25% you. But it just needs to be clear. And I think if you lay out those expectations and what roles people will be doing, that partnership will become immediately very clear, because we've worked with companies that have founders that one founder has a full-time job, another founder is doing that new venture completely themselves, and those corporate structures are quite can be different. And it can also be that once you quit your job, and if this is a success and blah blah blah, in 6 months time, if you're also full-time, hey, you will also get X amount more shares. So it's not a static thing, it always changes.
Andrew's going back to the Dragon's Den, which was clearly a bit of a motivation for you and a frustration as well. I could tell with some of how you've described it. Applicants often say, sort of, why do you draw a salary? How can the average person not draw that salary?
Yeah, so again, this is the thing about being a founder. A lot of the founders we work with, they pay themselves last. They sometimes don't pay themselves at all. They pay themselves ridiculously low salaries, like something like £200 a month. And the reason is because you don't found a company to get a salary. I mean, if you want to be living on a salaried job, you should go probably work at another corporate job or, a more established company to be earning a salary. The reason founders go out and start companies, they're trying to do one of two things. They're either going to change the way an industry or the world works by solving a really big problem, or they're going to sort of sacrifice that short-term salary for longer term success. I mean, the sort of exit payoffs and stuff is way more than a salary. I mean, you can have a salary of say 40,000 a year, or you can get paid in 5 years 120 million when a big VC comes and buys out all your shares. So it's kind of that potential future payout. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all CEOs and founders of startups don't earn a salary, because what tends to happen is once you get a bit of recurring revenue and a little bit of funding, that's actually what the funding is for, so you can also maintain a lifestyle. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be on an extravagant salary. You'll probably be on like the same salary as your lowest paid employee, but it's just to maintain a living, so you can focus on growing out the business and getting that sort of payout at the end.
Understand. Frankie asks sort of a really pertinent question, which is very relevant to today's society in terms of stress. And how do you handle the stress of being a CEO?
You kind of just have to deal with it, which is kind of, it's counterintuitive, but you can't get in your head too much. There are loads of different coping mechanisms out there. One of the companies we worked with, again, they're called Founders Taboo. and there, other charities out there like Loose Heads, and there's another person called James Rawcroft Davis from Luna, and they all talk about mental health, because being a startup founder is probably one of the most stressful things you can do, especially in the early days, because what tends to happen is the world isn't really black and white. So you get promised, say, X amount of funding, you go out, you hire the people, the first batch of the funding comes through, and then the second batch doesn't, and then you've got a pile of employees that you have to pay. You don't know where that next payment's going to come in from, and that is a very stressful situation. I think it's not a stigmatized or anything to be stressed in that situation, because that is a very stressful situation to be in. So a lot of people that we work with tend to do either the journaling, meditation, being open, having a support group, that kind of helps. The other side of it is a lot of founders tend to know that expectation, and then they manage that stress by, for example, having hours in the day where they don't have their phone or access to devices on it. I mean, to the extent even where, for example, I have a phone that's for work and I have a phone that's for like my personal use. In my personal phone, there's only like 3 or 4 phone numbers, and it's like my fiance and the vet and the dog groomers, and that's pretty much it. So I know that if that phone goes off, it will be an emergency. Otherwise, I don't have to worry about it. Because, if you're in that lifestyle and not in that routine, you will get really stressed out, and you won't be able to manage that stress. Because as a business, you're always being reactive. So as a person, you have to be proactive and manage how you can be in the best mental and physical state possible to represent your company. And that's like a really top level way of saying it. But in essence, there's really normal ways of doing that. What I do, for example, is I don't have my work emails on my phone, and I don't check them until I get into the office, because there's nothing I can do from home. Say if I check them before, I get ready in the morning, there's nothing I can do really to solve that problem in that position. I'll just be really stressed out for my whole morning, and I'll get to the office and sort it, So not looking at your emails, or, if you're going out with your friends and your family, actually take that time out and enjoy it, because that is what will charge you up to go and smash it at your business the next day. So yeah, managing your time and just taking responsibility, and also knowing when to sort of put your phone down and switch off is really important.
Gee, that's advice for anybody. It doesn't have to be anybody that's doing startups. Advice for me, It's and actually that's probably pinched my sort of final question, which I would have asked, is any final advice for budding entrepreneurs? But I've just got 1 or 2 other questions. Hal's coming with a quick question right now. What taxes do you have to pay as a startup?
So there's quite a few. So you normally have to pay your normal corporation tax, but it's nothing too bad to worry about, because as a startup, you're probably not going to be making a profit for your first couple of years. So that's kind of normally written off by the government. There's other taxes, for example, HMRC and pay contributions that you have to consider when you're hiring employees. And then there's sort of, if you're selling a product or a service, there's VAT. So you have to also consider your VAT registration. But there's loads of different people that can help you out with this. I mean, there's a company called Companies Made Simple. There's 3 Wise Bears. There's loads of like startup accountants that do it all for you, and basically you pay them something like £17 a month, and they just deal with that whole headache. Because if you get bogged down too much in worrying about taxes and this and that, you won't actually have enough time to spend on your business and do things that actually grow your business. So just outsource all of that.
Final question. What have you enjoyed most about working in a startup?
The list goes on. I mean, I always look at, the people I get to work with and the people I get to meet every day is phenomenal. So I was, surreal moment earlier on today, having conversations with someone that you watch on TV growing up. That's amazing. I don't actually look at work as work anymore. I was saying that to my co-founder earlier. Actually, I was like, I lose track of time, because I don't think of, I need to rush home for something. So I really enjoy that. So I actually look at what I do every day as work. I really, really enjoy it, which is great, because, there's a lot of fulfillment there in what I do. But there's other hands-on things that I really enjoy, because I get to learn something new every day. I get to make amazing new connections and meet new people through where I work. But all these people, are doing really interesting and fun things, right? So whether they're, in fact, I was watching Dragon's Den a couple of weeks ago, and there's a guy called Mark Wong on there, and I was like, oh, he's got a great story. I'm gonna chat to him, and now we're filming with him in a couple of weeks' time. And you can just do stuff like that, which is crazy, right? So you see someone on TV and then you get to go meet them in a couple of weeks, and then you get to do something with them. So that's really, really enjoyable. But I guess also just meeting new people and that side of it, but also the innovation side. I mean, yesterday or a couple of days ago, I was having a chat with a founder of a tech company based in the UK, but they're moving to San Francisco in a few months. And their product is literally going to change the world. So they can literally, from a Zoom call like this or a video call like this with your GP or a doctor, their video algorithm can have a look at your face, measure out your heart rate, your respiratory rate. They can predict when your life expectancy. They can predict how stressed you are. And it just means going to the GP is now redundant because it does all of that within a 30-second video. And looking at it, and to me, I'm not a technically minded person, so I look at that and I go, that's magic. And we get to work with them, and it's really cool. And I get to see really cool stuff like that all the time.
Jeet, can I ask, because I've got some really keen pupils who still ask you questions, and I'm sure they'll have more potential to ask. If you don't mind, can we put them in contact with you if they want any advice or any direction?
Yes, yeah, please do.
And would love to get you into Kings for an in-person talk as well at some stage soon. Look, Jeet, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Your insights are absolutely incredible into startup, into just real life, really. And it's clear to see how much that King's education has really benefited you in where you are now. If you don't mind, I'll just sort of summarize some of your thoughts, and please correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things. You talk about be a problem solver, be resilient, believe in yourself. You really be a decision maker was a big one. Have that energy, the drive, the vision. Show curiosity, intellectual curiosity. Be honest with yourself and honest with people around you. And one from me, which I hope you agree with, be humble, because actually that's a hugely important trait that will endear you to so many people. Is there anything I've missed there or anything you want to add?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, especially be humble. You have to sort of, you can't get anywhere alone. And there's 1,000 people behind you that are responsible for your success as well. And I guess the only other thing I'd add to that is you have to back yourself. I mean, if you don't back yourself, how can you expect other people to? So you've got to really invest in yourself and start believing in yourself, really.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, Jeet. It is really appreciated on behalf of everybody who's watching and others who will watch a video of this later. It really is appreciated, and you really have enriched us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.